You know that feeling when you walk into a room and just know something isn't right? It's not the smell or the sight of anything. It's deeper than that, like the air itself is warning you. I had that feeling the moment I got home that night. I'm Liam, 22 years old, living in a small suburban house I share with my parents and my younger brother Jamie. We've been here my whole life. It's the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever happens. My parents were out for the weekend, celebrating their anniversary at a cabin upstate. Jamie was supposed to be spending the night at a friend's house, so I had the place to myself. A rare treat, or so I thought. It started innocently enough. I came home from work, grabbed a quick dinner, and settled on the couch with a game controller in hand. The house felt eerily quiet, but I chalked it up to being used to the usual chaos of a family home. Around 9 p.m., I paused the game to grab a drink, and that's when I noticed it. Jamie's bedroom light was on. I frowned. He was supposed to be at his friend's place. I figured maybe he'd come back early and forgot to text me. "Jamie?" I called out, walking toward the hallway. No answer. I knocked on his door, but there was nothing but silence on the other side. Slowly, I turned the knob and peeked inside. The room was empty. I flipped off the light and shook my head, muttering about Jamie's forgetfulness. But as I walked back to the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't fear exactly, just an uncomfortable awareness, like someone was just out of sight. I tried to shrug it off and return to my game. Not long after, I heard it. A faint creak from upstairs, like someone shifting their weight on the old wooden floorboards. I froze. My hands gripped the controller tightly as I stared at the ceiling. "Jamie," I called out again, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. No reply. I set the controller down and grabbed my phone, dialing my brother. The call rang twice before going straight to voicemail. Great. Probably asleep at his friend's house, completely oblivious to my growing unease. Still, I couldn't ignore that sound. I headed upstairs, flipping on every light as I went. The hallway was empty. Jamie's room, the bathroom, even my parents' room, all exactly as they should be. I let out a shaky laugh. "Relax, Liam. It's an old house. Old houses make noise." I went back downstairs, deciding it was best to distract myself. I turned up the TV and tried to get back into my game, but my mind wouldn't settle. Every little noise, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, seemed amplified. Around 11 p.m., I decided to call it a night. As I climbed into bed, the unease began to fade. The familiar weight of my blankets felt grounding, and soon enough I started to drift off. That's when I heard it. A voice. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. "Liam." My eyes snapped open. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen. It came again, softer this time. "Liam." I sat up, my breath catching in my throat. It sounded like Jamie, but not quite right, like someone imitating him. I grabbed my phone and checked it again. No missed calls, no texts. I tried calling Jamie once more, and this time it went straight to voicemail. Sliding out of bed, I crept to my bedroom door and cracked it open. The hallway was pitch black. The light I'd left on earlier somehow turned off. The air felt colder than before, and the silence was oppressive, pressing against my ears. "Jamie?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The voice answered from the bottom of the stairs. "Liam." A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't a scream or a shout. It was calm. Too calm. I stepped back, heart hammering, and shut the door. Locking it, I pressed my back against the wood, clutching my phone in one hand. I opened the camera app and turned on the flashlight, aiming it around the room. Empty. Still, the voice kept calling. "Liam, come here." I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed with fear. It felt like hours. Then suddenly it stopped. The voice, the creaks, the oppressive silence, all of it just disappeared. The house felt normal again, as if nothing had happened. My racing heart began to slow, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was just overtired, spooked by being alone for the first time in years. I climbed back into bed, leaving the light on this time. The relief was short-lived. Just as I was starting to doze off, a loud bang jolted me upright. It came from downstairs, followed by rapid, heavy footsteps on the stairs. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Something was coming. I scrambled out of bed, heart racing, as I looked for anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes landed on the desk chair, and I grabbed it, holding it in front of me like a shield. The footsteps stopped just outside my door, and then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Liam. The voice was low, guttural, nothing like Jamie's anymore. Terror gripped me as I backed away from the door. "Who are you? What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The doorknob rattled, and the door creaked as if someone was leaning against it. "Come out," the voice whispered. I didn't think. I acted. I threw the chair against the window, shattering the glass, and climbed out onto the roof. Barefoot and shaking, I made my way to the edge and jumped, landing hard on the lawn below. Pain shot through my ankle, but I didn't care. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's house and banged on their door, screaming for help. When the police arrived, they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing to suggest anyone had been in the house but me. Jamie was still at his friend's house, and my parents were hours away. They chalked it up to stress or an overactive imagination, but I know what I heard, what I felt. I haven't been back to the house since that night. My parents think I'm being dramatic, but I don't care. Something was in there with me, and I'm not going back. Ever. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm trying to convince myself it's over, I swear I can still hear it. Liam. I used to think being home alone was a privilege. Peace, quiet, no one around to bother you. It's funny how quickly that sense of comfort can twist into something else, something darker. This happened last winter. I haven't told many people because, honestly, I'm not sure how to explain it without sounding insane. But every time I pass the front door now, I still check that second lock. It started on a Friday night. My parents had gone to visit my uncle a few towns over, and I had the whole house to myself for the weekend. I was 19 at the time, old enough that being alone wasn't a big deal. In fact, I looked forward to it. Pizza, a movie marathon, maybe a few late-night video games. The first strange thing happened around 8 p.m. I just finished eating and was rinsing dishes when I heard something from the front hallway. It wasn't loud, more like a soft creak, the kind you hear when someone shifts their weight on old floorboards. I stopped, holding my breath. The house settled sometimes, but this felt different. It felt deliberate. I listened for another sound, gripping the edge of the sink. For a long stretch, there was nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator behind me and the ticking of the clock in the living room. I shook it off. Maybe it was just the heater, but I couldn't shake that creeping sensation, like someone was there, just out of sight. By the time I finished cleaning, the feeling had faded. I threw on a blanket, grabbed some chips, and settled into the couch for a movie. The house was calm, except for the faint crackle of snow falling against the window. It was halfway through the film when I heard it again. A knock. Soft, deliberate, 3 times. I froze. The TV droned on, but I muted it immediately. The silence that followed felt heavier somehow. 3 knocks. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Maybe it was a delivery mix-up, I thought. I crept toward the door, barefoot on the cold tile, careful not to make a sound. I peeked through the peephole. No one. The porch light flickered, casting shifting shadows across the snow-covered lawn. I opened the door a crack, cold air rushing in. The porch was empty. Snow coated everything, undisturbed. I stepped outside, the chill biting my skin. The wind was still, yet I felt watched, like someone lingered just beyond the reach of the porch light. I closed the door and locked it, twice. At around 11 p.m., I was upstairs getting ready for bed when I heard footsteps, not creaks, but clear, steady steps. They were faint, but unmistakable, slow and deliberate, coming from the first floor. I turned off my bedroom light, heart thudding in my chest. From the top of the stairs, I strained to hear. The footsteps stopped. I stood there, gripping the railing, waiting for something else. Nothing. I told myself it was my imagination. Houses make noises, right? Pipes, wind. Things settle. Still, I locked my bedroom door before crawling into bed. The next morning felt normal. Sunlight streamed through the window, and everything felt less sinister in daylight. I almost laughed at myself for being so paranoid. That is until I went downstairs. The deadbolt on the front door was unlocked. I stopped mid-step, staring at it. I knew I had locked it. Both locks. I always did. But now, the second lock, the one I double-checked, was unlatched. I stood in the doorway for a long time, trying to remember if I had forgotten. But no, I hadn't. I twisted it shut, jiggling it to make sure it held firm. The lock wasn't loose. Later that afternoon, I went outside to shovel the driveway. That's when I saw the footprints. They led from the street across the snow-covered lawn and stopped right at my front door. No footprints led away. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I scanned the street, the neighboring yards, but nothing. The snow in front of every other house was untouched. Whoever it was, they had only come to mine. I stood there, shovel in hand, staring down at those prints for a long time. That night, I locked everything. Windows, doors, twice. By midnight, I was in bed with a chair propped under the handle of my bedroom door. I told myself I was overreacting. It was just footprints, right? At 2 a.m., I woke to knocking. Software faint, but not at the front door. It was coming from inside the house, at my bedroom door. Knock, knock, knock. I stopped breathing. The hair on my arm stood up. I didn't move, clutching the blankets as if they could protect me. A minute passed. Then another. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. I could hear faint breathing just beyond the door. I didn't dare respond. I stayed still, listening as the air around me felt heavier, colder. Eventually, the knocking stopped. But I never heard footsteps leaving. Morning came slowly. When sunlight finally crept through the window, I stayed in bed until I couldn't anymore. When I opened the door, the house was silent. Everything was exactly as I left it, except for the front door. The second lock was open. My parents came home later that day. I didn't tell them. I'm not sure why, but every night since, I checked the second lock. And I always listen carefully, because I'm still not sure if someone left that night. I don't scare easily, that's important to know. I've always been the one people call when they hear a weird noise in the basement or think someone's lurking outside their window. I'm practical, level-headed. I don't jump at shadows. But I'm telling you now, whatever happened that night was real, and I haven't been able to shake it since. My name's Daniel. I'm 28, live alone in a quiet neighborhood, and up until about 6 months ago, I thought of my house as my safe place. It's a modest 2-bedroom home, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I work late shifts at a security firm, and by the time I get home, the neighborhood's asleep. I like it that way. I don't know exactly when it started, but I think about it all the time, trying to pinpoint the first moment things felt off. I guess it began with the door, the basement door. It's always locked. Always. I don't even use the basement except to store junk I can't bring myself to get rid of. Old furniture, Christmas decorations, boxes of stuff I haven't unpacked since college. The lock on the door? I didn't even install it. It came with the house, and I left it because, honestly, who cares? The key hangs in the kitchen on a hook, where it's been since I moved in. But one night I came home and found the basement door slightly open, just a crack. At first, I thought maybe I left it that way. Maybe I grabbed something and forgot to lock it again. But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. I never go down there. I locked the door, double-checking it, and tried to forget about it. But the next night it was open again. That time I stood there longer, staring down the dark gap, feeling the kind of unease that makes your skin crawl. I turned on the basement light, expecting to see, I don't know, something, but there was nothing. Just cold concrete steps leading into shadow. I locked it again. The third time, I started to worry someone was getting into my house. I checked every window, every lock, tested the back door. Nothing. The house was secure, but the damn door kept opening. One night, I even jammed a chair under the handle, like I'd seen in movies. And the next morning, the chair was halfway across the kitchen floor. The door was wide open. I convinced myself I was sleepwalking. It was the only explanation that didn't make me feel insane. I started locking my bedroom door at night, just in case. That worked, for a while. But then the knocks started. They came late, always around 3 a.m. Soft. Not on the front door, not on the windows, on the basement door. The first time I thought it was the pipes. Houses settle. You hear things. But the pattern was too deliberate. 3 slow, steady knocks. I sat up in bed, listening, my heart pounding in my throat. I stayed like that for an hour, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. By morning, the basement door was wide open again. I should have left. I know that now. But I didn't. You tell yourself all kinds of things to avoid admitting you're scared. I convinced myself it was a draft, or maybe even mice somehow pushing it open. I replaced the lock with a heavy-duty deadbolt. Problem solved. Or so I thought. The deadbolt held for 3 nights. Then, at exactly 3:14 a.m., I woke up to the sound of it clicking open. I didn't get out of bed. I lay there, frozen, listening to the faint creak of the door as it swung open below me. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning, the door was still open, but this time the basement light was on. I hadn't turned it on. I know I didn't. I locked the door again, left for work, and tried to put it out of my mind. But that day, something new happened. When I got home, I noticed it right away. There were footprints. Faint, dusty footprints leading from the basement door across the kitchen floor, stopping at the base of the stairs. I don't know how long I stood there staring at them. They were barefoot, small, like a child's. I left the house. I stayed with a friend that night, barely explaining why. I didn't go into detail because, honestly, what was I supposed to say? Hey, I think there's someone, or something, living in my basement that comes upstairs while I sleep. After a couple of days, I convinced myself I was being ridiculous. I went back. The house felt normal, like I'd imagined it, but that night, I locked my bedroom door. I woke up at 3:33 a.m. to the sound of breathing right outside my bedroom door. Soft, slow breaths, too faint to be anything but intentional. I sat there in the dark, gripping the sheets, waiting for the handle to turn. It never did. The breathing stopped after a few minutes, and when I finally opened the door, the house was quiet. The basement door, still locked, but I knew, deep down, that whatever it wasn't in the basement anymore. I stayed in that house for 3 more days. On the last night, as I was packing to leave, I found something that finally made me go. In the far corner of the basement, tucked behind old boxes and broken furniture, was a mattress. An old, stained mattress I'd never seen before. And beside it, stacked neatly, were several empty photo frames. All of them were facing the wall. I've always loved old houses. There's something about the creaking floorboards, the drafty windows, and the way the walls seem to hold the weight of countless stories. When I stumbled across the little Victorian house on Elm Street, I knew I had to make it mine. It was a fixer-upper, sure, but the price was right, and it had a charm I couldn't resist. I moved in 2 months ago. At first, the quirks of the place were endearing. The way the stairs groaned under my weight, the soft hum of the radiator in the dead of night, even the occasional scurrying of mice in the attic. It all felt like part of the home's character. But then, little by little, things started to change. The first time I noticed something strange was a week after I moved in. I was unpacking in the living room when I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper. It was so soft that I thought I'd imagined it. I stopped what I was doing and listened, but the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I chalked it up to the house settling and went back to unpacking. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. A low murmur, like someone speaking in another room. I sat up, heart pounding, and strained to hear. The sound seemed to be coming from the walls. It was faint, indistinct, but definitely there. I told myself it was just the old pipes. Maybe they were knocking, or air was trapped in the system. That was logical. That made sense. But as the days went on, the whispers became harder to ignore. They always started in the evening, just as the house began to quiet down. At first they were faint, a word or two here and there, so soft I couldn't make them out. But over time, they grew louder, clearer. I could swear I heard my name once, spoken in a low, raspy tone that sent a chill down my spine. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. After all, living alone in a creaky old house can mess with your mind, right? Then came the scratching. It started in the bedroom, late at night, just behind the wall where my bed was pushed up against. It sounded like fingernails, long and sharp, dragging slowly across the plaster. I lay there, frozen, my breath caught in my throat. I told myself it had to be mice, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. One evening, I decided to confront it. I'd had enough of the sleepless nights, the creeping dread, the feeling that something was watching me. I grabbed a flashlight and a hammer and went into the bedroom. The scratching had been particularly bad that night, and I was determined to find the source. I tapped on the wall where the sound was coming from and listened. It was quiet. Too quiet. I hesitated for a moment before raising the hammer and striking the plaster. A chunk of it crumbled away, revealing the wooden beams beneath. I shone the flashlight into the hole, expecting to find a nest of mice or rats, but there was nothing, just empty space. That's when I heard it, a whisper, clear as day, coming from right behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but the room was empty. My skin prickled as I felt a cold draft sweep past me, even though the windows were shut tight. I stumbled out of the room, leaving the hole in the wall exposed. That night I slept on the couch, clutching the hammer like a lifeline. The next morning, I told myself I was overreacting. I was just tired, stressed, maybe even a little lonely. I decided to take a break from the house, get out for a while, clear my head. I spent the day at a coffee shop downtown, reading and people watching, trying to distract myself. By the time I got back home, the sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the neighborhood. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm, but that calm didn't last. That night, as I lay on the couch, I heard the whispers again. Only this time they were louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from all around me, surrounding me. And then, as if in response to my mounting terror, they stopped. Silence. Oppressive, deafening silence. I sat up, clutching the hammer, my ears straining for any sound. That's when I noticed it. The hole in the wall. The one I'd made in the bedroom. There was a faint glow emanating from it, a sickly yellow light that pulsed like a heartbeat. I don't remember getting up or walking to the bedroom, but the next thing I knew, I was standing in the doorway, staring at the hole. The light was brighter now, spilling out onto the floor. I wanted to run, to leave the house and never come back, but something drew me closer. It was like I was being pulled toward it, an invisible force compelling me to look inside. I knelt down, flashlight in hand, and peered into the hole. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. There was something inside the wall, pressed up against the wooden beams. It was pale, almost translucent, with hollow eyes that stared back at me. Its mouth was moving, whispering words I couldn't understand. And then it smiled. I scrambled back, dropping the flashlight, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The thing in the wall didn't move, but I could feel its presence, its cold, malevolent gaze following me as I stumbled out of the room. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch, every light in the house turned on, waiting for dawn. When morning finally came, I called a contractor to seal up the hole. I didn't care about finding answers anymore. I just wanted it gone. But even now, as I sit here writing this, I can hear the whispers. They're louder than ever, no longer confined to the walls. They follow me wherever I go, a constant, chilling reminder that some things aren't meant to be disturbed. I don't know what I unleashed that night, but one thing is certain. It's not going to let me go.